All right, Mr. Bottom. I've been looking through my notes about your claims and I've been trying to think of good reasons to believe what you're telling me. But in order for us to keep on keeping on first, I have to tell you that you have an overpowering odor of garlic cloves and vinegar on you. You're funkifying the whole studio. You smell like a farm animal. It's almost like you're trying to get rid of the Kavorka. Look, I'm a professional, so I realize that we've got to make the best of a bad situation. But ever since that day when you say that you and your friends were rehearsing Pyramus and Thisbe in the woods for the Duke's wedding celebration, I think you've been hallucinating. I think what really happened was that you woke up and found that your friends were gone, and with darkness all around you, you probably got disoriented. In fact, it's possible that your old friends called to thee that night, but I just don't feel like you would have even known it. Yes, I am very serious about what I do, so let's start staring down reality because it don't do me no good to beat around the bush with you. Believe me, not a day goes by when I don't realize that some people live in a fantasy world. You want me to believe that a fairy princess fell in love with you in the forest. Fine. I believe you believe it, but I have to tell you that in order for me to believe everything that you say happened to you was not a dream, I've really got to use my imagination. I'm afraid we're going to have to end this session now because I've got a show to do. Anyway, I wish you and your mates good luck with your performance. By the way, you really need to take a bath. You stink. In the 1939 film The Wizard of Oz, you'll remember that at the end of the movie, Dorothy wakes up from an incredible adventure and believes that it was all just a dream. At the end of A Midsummer Night's Dream, four young lovers wake up also believing that the incredible adventure they've just experienced was a dream. As you can see, some ideas are timeless. So let's take a look at the plot. The play opens with Duke Theseus of Athens and Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons, who are getting married in 4 days. But while Theseus is restless about how long he has to wait, Hippolyta thinks the time will pass like a dream. Aegeus comes to Theseus about his daughter Hermia, who is in love with Lysander and refuses to marry Demetrius, whom her father prefers. In fact, Aegeus is so enraged by her refusal that he threatens to invoke an ancient Athenian law whereby a daughter must marry the suitor chosen by her father or else face death. Out of compassion, Theseus offers Hermia another choice, lifelong chastity as a nun worshipping the goddess Diana. However, Hermia and Lysander plan to elope by escaping into the Athenian forest. From there, they will go to Lysander's aunt's house, who thinks of him as her heir. Hermia shares her plans with Helena, her best friend, who longs to be with Demetrius, who broke up with Helena in order to be with Hermia. Desperate to regain Demetrius's love, Helena tells Demetrius about the lovers, and he follows them into the woods in hopes of finding Hermia, while Helena trails behind him like a spaniel. Next, we meet the rude mechanicals, who are working-class tradesmen and amateur actors by the names of Peter Quince, Nick Bottom, Francis Flute, Robin Starveling, Tom Snout, and Snug the Joiner. They want to perform a play for the wedding of the Duke and the Queen entitled The Most Lamentable Comedy and Most Cruel Death of Pyramus and Thisbe. Peter Quince bestows the parts on the other players. Nick Bottom, who is a ham, is supposed to play the main role of Pyramus, but also wants to play Thisbe and the lion at the same time. Finally, Quince tells Bottom that he can only play the role of Pyramus. And even though they're terrible actors, they fear that their portrayals will be so lifelike that they may frighten the audience. Peter Quince ends the meeting telling the actors that they'll rehearse in the forest. In a parallel plotline, Oberon, king of the fairies, and Titania, his queen, have come to the forest outside of Athens to attend Theseus and Hippolyta's wedding. Oberon and Titania are on bad terms because Titania refuses to give up her Indian changeling boy to Oberon to become his henchman, since the child's late mother was one of Titania's worshippers. But Oberon decides to punish Titania and calls upon Robin Goodfellow, or Puck, his shrewd and knavish sprite, to help him make a magical love potion. When the concoction is applied to the eyelids of a sleeping person, that person will fall in love with the first thing they encounter when he or she wakes. Oberon sends Puck to retrieve the needed flower in hopes that Titania will fall in love with some forest animal so that he can shame her into giving up the little Indian boy. Meanwhile, Helena and Demetrius enter the forest, and she continuously makes advances towards Demetrius, saying that she will love him more than Hermia, but he just rebukes her with his cruel insults. Oberon oversees Demetrius' scorn and tells Puck to spread some of the magical juice from the flower on the eyelids of the young Athenian man. When Titania goes to sleep, attended by her fairies, Oberon sneaks up and puts the love potion in her eyes. Soon, Lysander and Hermia enter. They're lost and exhausted from the journey. Hermia rejects Lysander's immodest advances to sleep together, and the two of them lie down in separate areas. Puck enters, but mistakes Lysander for Demetrius, not having seen either before, and gives Lysander the sleeping potion. Just then, Helena enters, and seeing the sleeping Lysander, disturbs him to determine whether he is dead or just asleep. As he wakes, he immediately falls in love with Helena. Helena thinks Lysander is mocking her and runs away. When Hermia awakes, she sees that Lysander is gone and goes into the woods to find him. Meanwhile, Peter Quince and the other amateur actors prepare to rehearse their play in the woods, not far from Titania's abode. Puck spies Bottom, who, taking his name to be another word for a jackass, transforms his head into that of a donkey. When Bottom returns for his next line, the other workmen are terrified and run away. Bottom is confused, and as he waits for his friends to return, he starts singing to himself. Titania, having been given the love potion, is awakened by Bottom's singing and immediately falls in love with him. While she and her fairies lavish attention on Bottom, Oberon takes her changeling boy away. Next, Oberon sees that Demetrius is still following Hermia. The fairy king condemns Puck for his mistake and sends him to get Helena while he administers the love potion to Demetrius while he sleeps. When he awakes, he sees Helena arguing with Lysander and instantly falls in love with her. And even though the two men are now both in love with her, Helena is convinced that they're just mocking her. Meanwhile, Hermia finds Lysander and asks him why he left her. But Lysander says that he never loved Hermia and only loves Helena. Soon, the women get into a catfight, and Helena chides Hermia for joining the men's confederacy. Hermia accuses Helena of stealing her true love's heart and blames her for the supposed mockery. Oberon tells Puck that they must resolve this conflict before morning so that none of them will have any memory of what has happened. As Puck distracts Lysander and Demetrius from fighting over Helena and leads them apart, eventually all four of them fall asleep. Puck administers the love potion to Lysander again and returns his love back to Hermia. Puck then casts another spell over the four Athenian lovers so that when they awaken, they'll think that whatever just happened to them was a dream. Having achieved his goal, Oberon releases Titania from his spell and has Puck remove the donkey's head from Bottom, and the fairies disappear. Theseus and Hippolyta arrive on the scene during an early morning hunt and stumble across the lovers still sleeping in the glade. As they wake, Demetrius says that he no longer loves Hermia and only loves Helena. Thus, Theseus overrules Aegeus's demands and makes arrangements for all of them to have a group wedding. The lovers cannot recall what happened to them and decide that the night's events must have been a dream. Meanwhile, Bottom awakes and he too decides that he must have experienced a dream. Back in Athens, Peter Quince and his actors worry that Bottom has gone missing, but just then, Bottom returns and the actors get ready to put on Pyramus and Thisbe. In the final scene of the play, Theseus, Hippolyta, and the lovers watch the 6 workmen perform their play at their wedding reception. The mechanicals are so bad at playing their roles that the guests laugh as if they were watching a comedy, and everyone retires to bed. Afterward, Oberon, Titania, Puck, and the other fairies bless the Duke's house and its occupants with good fortune, prosperity, and fertility. At the very end, Puck provides an epilogue suggesting to the audience that what they have just experienced might just be a dream. When we return, we'll look at some of the remarkable characters in A Midsummer Night's Dream. All right, let's take a look at some of the characters in A Midsummer Night's Dream. Theseus is the Duke of Athens, and he's just about to be married in 4 more days to Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons, whom Theseus conquered in battle. Aegeus is a cranky old man who comes to Theseus complaining that his daughter Hermia will not marry his pick of Demetrius because she loves Lysander. Now, there are 2 problems with this situation. The first is that both men are virtually the same in status, wealth, and possessions. The only chief difference is that Helena loves Lysander, so there's no legitimate reason for Aegeus to prefer Demetrius over Lysander. Plus, they all know that Demetrius used to woo Hermia's childhood friend Helena, but spurned her to follow Hermia, so he's already starting off looking like an inconstant lover. The second problem is that there is an ancient privilege of Athens that says, since Hermia is Aegeus' daughter, he may have her put to death if she refuses to marry his choice of son-in-law. We also have another couple, Oberon and Titania, who are the fairy king and queen, but are currently on the outs with one another because Oberon wants Titania to give him her Indian boy to be his henchman, which she refuses to do. Robin Goodfellow, also known as Puck, is a mischievous and knavish sprite who serves Oberon but enjoys stirring up trouble. And then we have the Rude Mechanicals. This is a group of 6 men, including Peter Quince, Nick Bottom, Francis Flute, Robin Starveling, Tom Snout, and Snug the Joiner. They're all laborers by trade who desire to be amateur actors. Bottom is by far the ham of the group and tries to play several different parts in the play to be performed for Theseus's wedding. And finally, we have Helena and Hermia, who we learn have been childhood playfellows. When the play begins, both Demetrius and Lysander desire Hermia. However, Helena is totally infatuated with Demetrius, even though he spurns her affections. Her character comes across as that of a doormat, and she laments that she is as ugly as a bear. Hermia, on the other hand, is very feisty and bold. She's not afraid to speak up to her father, and says she'd rather die than marry Demetrius. However, Hermia and Lysander decide to run away into the woods and elope. But Helena does have one big advantage over Hermia, and that is her height, as we shall see when the 2 women get into a catfight. When we return, we'll look at some of the plot devices and memorable scenes in A Midsummer Night's Dream. Shakespeare used some of his most familiar plot devices in this play, including a wacky constraint. In this case, we have Aegeus, a father who is willing to kill his daughter rather than have her refuse to marry his choice for her husband. And whenever you have a forbidden marriage, you almost always have an elopement. In this case, that leads us to our second plot device, escaping into the woods. Woodland settings are very popular in Shakespeare plays because they represent escapism and allow the characters to explore who they really are. Next, we have miscommunicated messages. Oberon wants Robin Goodfellow to anoint Demetrius's eyes with a love potion so that he will fall back in love with Helena. But since Oberon only tells Robin to look for a man in Athenian garb, he mistakes Lysander for Demetrius. Now we have 2 men who love Helena, hate Hermia, and Puck is having himself a good old time about it. There's also the play within a play. In this case, it's called The Most Lamentable Comedy and Most Cruel Death of Pyramus and Thisbe, which is described as a tedious brief scene of very tragic mirth. The title is so ridiculous that it intrigues Theseus to select it as entertainment at his wedding feast. This provides the audience with much humor, provided by the mechanical's pitiful acting, and Bottom, who thinks he has to continuously explain the play to the nobles so that they will understand it, and that the actor playing the lion is not an actual lion. He also mispronounces several words, confusing odious with odorous and deflowered with devoured. If you watch the 1981 BBC Shakespeare version of this play, one of the most memorable scenes is Act 2, Scene 1, when Helen Mirren, who plays Titania, enters carrying the Indian child on whom she dotes. There's an expression of love on her face that is absolutely priceless. It's also where she explains to Oberon why she is caring for this child and will not part with him. In Act 3, Scene 1, Puck decides to have some fun and not only give Bottom the head of an ass, but also have Titania fall in love with him. If you watch the 1999 Michael Hoffman version of this play, you'll see the beautiful Michelle Pfeiffer, that white gold, fall in love with Kevin Kline in one of the best scenes in the entire movie. In Act 3, Scene 2, we have a good old-fashioned catfight when Helen and Hermia go at it, each thinking that the other one has influenced the men to change their affections, as both Lysander and Demetrius now fight for Helena's love. And finally, in Act 5, Scene 1, we have the ridiculous performance of Pyramus and Thisbe by the Rude Mechanicals. Picture the little rascals performing a grown-up version of a play. It's so bad that the audience finds it hysterical. In fact, at the very end, Bottom asks the Duke if he would like to see the epilogue, and the Duke replies with one of the best lines in the entire play, "No epilogue, I pray you, for your play needs no excuse. Never excuse, for when the players are all dead, there need none to be blamed." When we return, we'll look at some of the themes that run through A Midsummer Night's Dream. A Midsummer Night's Dream is one of the only Shakespeare plays in which we get to see a good old-fashioned catfight between two women fighting over men. But in reality, they're really fighting over height. Since Helena is taller than Hermia, she makes some comments to which Hermia takes offense. If you have the opportunity to watch this play, you'll certainly enjoy the action in Act 3, Scene 2, when Helena and Hermia, with some additional insults from Lysander, go at it pretty hard. Here are some excerpts from that scene. Helena says, "Fine in faith, have you no modesty, no maiden shame, no touch of bashfulness? What, will you tear impatient answers from my gentle tongue? Fie, fie, you counterfeit, you puppet, you." Hermia responds, "Puppet? Why so? Aye, that way goes the game. Now I perceive that she hath made compare between our statures. She hath urged her height, and with her personage, her tall personage, her height forsooth, she hath prevailed with him. And are you grown so high in his esteem, because I am so dwarfish and so low? How low am I, thou painted maypole? Speak, how low am I? I am not yet so low, but that my nails can reach until thine eyes." Helena says, "I pray you, though you mock me, gentlemen, let her not hurt me. I was never cursed. I have no gift at all in shrewdness. I am a right maid for my cowardice. Let her not strike me. You perhaps may think because she is something lower than myself that I can match her." Hermia replies, "Lower? Hark again!" Later, Helena continues, "Oh, when she is angry, she is keen and shrewd. She was a vixen when she went to school, and though she be but little, she is fierce." Hermia goes off the rails. "Little again? Nothing but low and little? Why will you suffer her to flout me thus? Let me come to her." And Lysander says, "Get you gone, you dwarf, you minimus of hindering knotgrass maid, you bead, you acorn." Finally, Helena says, "I will not trust you. I no longer stay in your cursed company. Your hands than mine are quicker for a fray. My legs are longer, though, to run away." I'm not saying that men don't engage in stupid disagreements, but ladies, fighting over the difference in height, All I can say is, vanity, thy name is woman. Unfortunately, what the women fail to understand is that when it comes to beauty and attraction, men care very little about a woman's height. Tall women can be confident, assertive, magnetic, respected, and statuesque, while shorter women can be delicate, genteel, petite, precious, and dainty. But then again, the men have their own issues to contend with. While Demetrius is obviously inconstant after having switched his affections from Helena to Hermia without any legitimate explanation, Lysander is also lacking in certain qualities. When left alone in the woods with Hermia, he quickly makes sexual advances towards her, taking advantage under cover of night. Fortunately, Hermia is more disciplined and sensible and sends him packing to sleep further away on the ground. One only need to listen to Ophelia's bawdy songs in Hamlet to know that men that sleep with women before they're married rarely ever wind up with a wedding ring on their finger. There seems to be a battle of the sexes going on in this play. Even though Theseus and Hippolyta are about to get married, there appears to be a bit of uneasiness and tension between the two of them. Part of this may be because Theseus says that he won her with his sword. That implies that the relationship may not have been a mutual decision, at least not at first. Also, there's a power struggle between Oberon and Titania over who gets control of the orphaned Indian changeling boy. Titania has him, but Oberon wants him for his henchman and is willing to drug and humiliate his wife in order to get him. Here is Titania digging in her heels as to why she will not give up the child. This is in Act 2, Scene 1. Set your heart at rest. The fairyland buys not the child of me. His mother was a votress of my order, and in the spiced Indian air by night, full often hath she gossiped by my side, and sat with me on Neptune's yellow sands, marking the embarked traders on the flood, when we have laughed to see the sails conceive and grow big-bellied with that wanton wind, which she with pretty and with swimming gait following, her womb then, rich with my young squire, would imitate and sail upon the land to fetch me trifles and return again, as from a voyage, rich with merchandise. But she, being mortal, of that boy did die, and for her sake do I rear up her boy, and for her sake I will not part with him. And let's not forget Aegeus exercising his right, power, and control over his daughter Hermia. I mean, it's not every day that you see a father willing to kill his own daughter rather than let her marry the respectable, affluent, and eligible man that she loves. On the other hand, Theseus almost sounds like he's powerless to control the fate of Hermia, who is in love with Lysander. Yet, at the end of the play, he simply overrules Aegeus and allows the couple to marry. So why didn't he just do this to begin with? When we return, we'll look at some of the most powerful lines in this play. Some of the lines in A Midsummer Night's Dream will probably be familiar to people who have never even heard of Shakespeare. For example, in Act 1, Scene 1, we hear Lysander say, "The course of true love never did run smooth." And while that's true, it doesn't mean that it's not worth the wait. When Bottom awakes in the forest, we hear his thoughts shared in his soliloquy. "Hey ho, Peter Quince! Flute the bellows mender! Snout the tinker! Starveling! God's my life, stolen hence and left me asleep. I have had a most rare vision. I have had a dream, past the wit of man to say what dream it was. Man is but an ass if he'd go about to expound this dream. Methought I was... there is no man can tell what. Methought I was... and methought I had... But man is a patched fool if he will offer to say what methought I had. The eye of man hath not heard, the ear of man hath not seen. Man's hand is not able to taste, his tongue to conceive, nor his heart to report what my dream was. I will get Peter Quince to write a ballad of this dream. It shall be called Bottom's Dream, because it hath no bottom." By the way, Shakespeare used a biblical reference from chapter 2, verse 9 of St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, which reads, "But, as it is written, the eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither hath it entered into the heart of man, what things God hath prepared for them that love him." The play concludes in Act 5, Scene 1 with an exceptional epilogue delivered by Robin Goodfellow. "If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here, while these visions did appear. And this weak and idle theme, no more yielding but a dream. Gentles, do not reprehend, if you pardon we will mend, and as I am an honest Puck, if we have unearned luck, now to scape the serpent's tongue, we will make amends ere long. Else the Puck a liar call, so good night unto you all. Give me your hands, if we be friends, and Robin shall restore amends." And let's finish up with another great line from Act 3, Scene 2, when Robin says, "Captain of our fairy band, Helena is here at hand, and the youth mistook by me, pleading for a lover's fee. Shall we their fond pageant see? Lord, what fools these mortals be." Who can argue with that? When we return, we'll look at some of the major turning points in A Midsummer Night's Dream and some correlations to the other Shakespeare plays. I just want to point out three major turning points that affect the outcome of this play. The first one takes place when Puck gives the love potion to Lysander by mistake. Or does he? When Oberon questions him about applying the love potion to the wrong Athenian, we see that he has his excuses all ready to go. In Act 3, Scene 2, he says, "Then will two at once woo one, that must needs be sport alone. And those things do best please me that befall preposterously." He continues saying, "Believe me, King of Shadows, I mistook. Did not you tell me I should know the man by the Athenian garments he had on? And so far blameless proves my enterprise, that I have anointed an Athenian's eyes, and so far am I glad it so did sort, as this their jangling I esteem a sport." And while he might have made an honest mistake, he's not the least bit disappointed with the results. What we need to remember about Puck is that he is a prankster, an instigator, and a mischief maker. Sure, he's going to make everything right, but until he does, you can see how much he's enjoying all the mixed-up confusion that he's caused. Bottom's transformation provides the opportunity to enter the fairy world between reality and fantasy. Or is it just a dream? And of course, once Demetrius tells Aegeus that he does indeed love Helena, that allows the couples to both be paired off. Now, let's look at some of the correlations to many of the other Shakespeare plays. We've seen that the forest setting is not uncommon. We have Birnam Woods in Macbeth. In Titus Andronicus, Lavinia's rape and mutilation takes place in the forest. In The Two Gentlemen of Verona, the play ends with most of the characters meeting up in the forest near Milan. And in Henry IV, Part 2, we have the infamous betrayal by Prince John of Lancaster in the forest of Gautreks. There's also the play within a play, in this case Pyramus and Thisbe. In Love's Labour's Lost, it was the pageant of the Nine Worthies, and in Hamlet, we had the mousetrap. Duke Theseus undoes the ancient law at the end of the play, so why didn't he just do this in the first place? We've seen this with Duke Vincentio in Measure for Measure, with Duke Silenus in The Comedy of Errors, and with the Duke of Venice in The Merchant of Venice. We have men switching their affection from one woman to another, in this case Demetrius and Lysander. We saw this with Proteus in The Two Gentlemen of Verona, with Angelo in Measure for Measure, with Mark Antony and Antony and Cleopatra, with Duke Orsino in The Twelfth Night, with Hortensio in The Taming of the Shrew, with Saturninus in Titus Andronicus, with Edward IV in Henry VI Part 3, with Henry VI in Henry VI Part 1, with Henry VIII, and with Romeo in Romeo and Juliet. So why don't these guys just make up their minds already? Helen and Hermia are two women who were raised together and were inseparable as children, just like Rosalind and Celia in As You Like It, and Marina and Philoten in Pericles, Prince of Tyre. Aegeus accuses Lysander of bewitching his daughter with verses to get her to love him. In Othello, Brabantio accuses Othello of charming his daughter Desdemona with witchcraft. By the way, neither of these accusations was true. Aegeus also thinks of Hermia as his property to be disposed of. In The Taming of the Shrew, Petruchio describes his new bride, Catherine, as his goods, his chattels, his horses, his ox, his ass, and his everything. In Troilus and Cressida, Cressida's father, Calchas, whisks her away to be reunited with him without any thought about taking her away from the man she loves. Helena tells Demetrius that she is his spaniel and dotes on him. In The Two Gentlemen of Verona, Julia pretends to be a male page in order to serve her former boyfriend Proteus. Viola pretends to be a male page in order to serve her master Duke Orsino in Twelfth Night, and Helen is a humble servant to Bertram on whom she quietly dotes in All's Well That Ends Well. All of these women could do with a good dose of healthy self-esteem, in my opinion. Shakespeare alters his settings of court, country, and court, or civilization, wilderness, and civilization in this play, but he also did that in As You Like It, The Winter's Tale, and Cymbeline. Oberon marries Hippolyta, the conquered queen of the Amazons. In Titus Andronicus, Saturninus marries Tamara, the conquered queen of the Goths. Lysander and Hermia try to run away and elope. Romeo and Juliet, who are already married, also try to run away together. Florizel and Perdita try to elope in The Winter's Tale. Valentine and Silvius try to elope in The Two Gentlemen of Verona. And Othello and Desdemona successfully elope in Othello, as do Master Fenton and Anne Page in The Merry Wives of Windsor. You can definitely add Demetrius to the bad boyfriends turned husbands club, along with Bertram in All's Well That Ends Well, Proteus in The Two Gentlemen of Verona, Angelo and Lucio in Measure for Measure, and Don Armado in Love's Labour's Lost. Puck is a very active servant sprite who gets very involved in the action, as did Ariel in The Tempest. Demetrius threatens Helena with potential rape in the woods, as does Proteus with Sylvia in The Two Gentlemen of Verona. And of course, Chiron and Demetrius actually do rape Lavinia in the woods in Titus Andronicus. By the way, in Act 2, Scene 1, Oberon says that Theseus raped Periguna after conquering her. And finally, Hermia withstands Lysander's sexual advances in the woods to preserve her chastity until they can wed. This was wisely done, since we've seen the consequences of what happens to other characters in different plays who enter into sexual relationships without the benefit of marriage, like Mark Antony in Antony and Cleopatra, Troilus and Cressida, and Juliet and Claudio in Measure for Measure. Conversely, couples like Marina and Lysimachus in Pericles, Prince of Tyre, Hero and Claudio in Much Ado About Nothing, and Miranda and Ferdinand in The Tempest have their unions blessed because they practiced abstinence and waited to consummate their marriages. When we return, we'll look at some interesting facts about A Midsummer Night's Dream. In preparing to do this episode, I did some research and I came across some interesting facts. A Midsummer Night's Dream was written in 1595 or early 1596. The title refers to the English folk concept of midsummer madness, when some people, especially young lovers, go a little crazy. And though it's not a translation or adaptation of an earlier work, it's believed that Ovid's Metamorphoses and Chaucer's The Knight's Tale served as inspirations for the play. There's also a little confusion about when this play is actually taking place, because it intertwines the Midsummer Eve, which would be June 23rd, the summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere, and just about the longest day of the year, with May Day as evidenced by Theseus's comment that the slumbering youths may be observing the rite of May, which would be May 1st. Opinions also differ on whether the entire play takes place over 4 days or just 2. Shakespeare uses class structures in this play to differentiate his characters' high and low status. For example, the Athenians speak in verse, while the working-class amateur actors speak in prose. The same actor who played Bottom in Shakespeare's day also played Dogberry in Much Ado About Nothing. You'll note that Dogberry emphatically insists, "But masters, remember that I am an ass. Though it be not written down, yet forget not that I am an ass." Audiences who had seen the earlier performance would have certainly appreciated the inside joke. The tale of Pyramus and Thisbe featured in this play is also referenced by Jessica and Lorenzo in The Merchant of Venice. It also mirrors the story of Romeo and Juliet in that both lovers are forbidden to marry and wind up tragically killing themselves for love. Still, many people consider A Midsummer Night's Dream as an alternate version of Romeo and Juliet with a happy ending. Hippolyta is known as the Queen of the Amazons. So who were they? The Amazons were female warriors and hunters known for their physical agility, strength, archery, writing skills, and the arts of combat. Their society was closed to men. They raised only their daughters and returned their sons to their fathers, with whom they would only socialize briefly in order to reproduce. They were commanded by their queen and regularly undertook extensive military expeditions into the far corners of the world, from Scythia to Thrace, Asia Minor, and the Aegean Islands, reaching as far away as Arabia and Egypt. By the way, a character called Hippolyta, whose name means "she who unleashed horses," also appears in The Two Noble Kinsmen, and that character also marries Theseus, the Duke of Athens. In 1826, Felix Mendelssohn composed a concert overture inspired by A Midsummer Night's Dream. In the 1935 Max Reinhardt filming of A Midsummer Night's Dream, Jimmy Cagney played Bottom, Olivia de Havilland played Hermia, and 15-year-old Mickey Rooney played Puck. In 1964, a musical adaptation of A Midsummer Night's Dream debuted on Broadway called Babes in the Wood. And finally, don't miss the spectacular music in the 1999 Michael Hoffman version of A Midsummer Night's Dream, which features the very recognizable Brindisi, also known as the drinking song, from Giuseppe Verdi's opera La Traviata throughout the entire film, and also includes the very familiar Wedding March by Felix Mendelssohn. You will absolutely love this music. When we return, we'll look at some of the magnificent actors who appear in the 1981 BBC Shakespeare version of A Midsummer Night's Dream. All right, now let's take a look at some of the great actors in the 1981 BBC Shakespeare version of A Midsummer Night's Dream. The magnificent Helen Mirren, who plays Titania, also played Rosalind in As You Like It in 1978, and Imogen in Cymbeline in 1982. Pippa Gard, who plays Hermia, also played Miranda in The Tempest in 1980, and Diana in All's Well That Ends Well in 1981. Notably, in all 3 plays, the actress was charged with guarding her virginity, modesty, and honor against the advances of unwanted aggressors. Hugh Quarshie, who plays Philostrate, also played the evil villain Aaron in Titus Andronicus in 1985. Jeffrey Lumpson, who plays Aegeus, also played Philario in Cymbeline in 1982. Ray Mort, who plays Snug the Joiner, also played Jailer in Cymbeline in 1982. John Fowler, who plays Flute, also played the boy in Henry IV Part II and Henry V, both in 1983. And Robert Lindsay, who plays Lysander, also played Fabian in Twelfth Night in 1980, Captain Dumaine in All's Well That Ends Well in 1981, Iachimo in Cymbeline in 1982, and Benedict in Much Ado About Nothing in 1984. Also in 1984, he starred in a revival of Me and My Girl opposite Emma Thompson, earning himself a Tony Award. And in 2021, Lindsay starred as Moonface Martin in a revival of Anything Goes, in which he was reunited with Felicity Kendall, his 1980 Twelfth Night co-star after 41 years. And now let's also take a look at the all-star cast who appeared in the 1999 Michael Hoffman version of A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is set at the turn of the 19th century. Kevin Kline, who plays Bottom, also played Jaques in the Kenneth Branagh version of As You Like It in 2006. Bernard Hill, who plays Aegeus, also played various roles, including the Duke of York in the BBC versions of Henry VI Parts 1, 2, and 3, and Richard III, all in 1983. He also played Captain Smith in the 1997 blockbuster film Titanic. Rupert Everett plays Oberon. The gorgeous and talented Michelle Pfeiffer plays Titania. Stanley Tucci plays Puck. Dominic West, who plays Lysander, also played Fred Casely in Chicago in 2002. Sophie Marceau, who plays Hippolyta, also played Princess Isabella in Braveheart in 1995. Callista Flockhart, who plays Helena, also starred in the TV series Ally McBeal. Max Wright, who plays Robin Starveling, also played Willie Tanner in the TV series Alf. Christian Bale, who plays Demetrius, also played the boy in Kenneth Branagh's 1989 version of Henry VIII, and Theodore Lawrence in the 1984 version of Little Women, before going on to star as Batman in the Dark Knight trilogy of movies. Roger Rees, who plays Peter Quince, also starred in the 1982 Broadway version of the life and adventures of Nicholas Nickleby. And finally, David Murata, who plays a pantomime dwarf, also played the baby in The Passion of the Christ in 2004. And now get ready for today's trivia challenge, which is called Ancient History. All right, now it's time for today's trivia challenge, which is called Ancient History. Shakespeare often wrote about ancients, which is another word for ensigns. Name the play in which these ancients appear and to whom they directly reported. Number 1, Helicanus. Number 2, Pistol. And number 3, Iago. When we get back, I'll have the answers for you, and we'll finish up with some relevant lessons from A Midsummer Night's Dream. Okay, now let's see how you did on today's trivia challenge called Ancient History. As I said, Shakespeare often used the word ancients as another word for ensigns. You were to name the plays in which these ancients appear and to whom they directly reported. Number 1, Helicanus. He reported to Pericles in Pericles, Prince of Tyre. Number 2, Pistol. He reported to Sir John Falstaff in Henry IV, Part 2. And number 3, Iago. He reported to Othello in Othello, the Moor of Venice. Now let's finish up with some relevant lessons from A Midsummer Night's Dream. First, whatever you are is a selling point. You just need to learn how to improvise and innovate like the Rude Mechanicals did. The women could have also benefited from this advice as well. If you're a small business, that means that you're local and personable. If your business is new, that means that you're fresh and open-minded and hungry. And if your business is big, it means that you're solid, dependable, and well-known. Remember, whatever you are, sell the advantages to your customer. Next, learn to over-communicate, not under-communicate. Oberon criticized Puck for his mistakes, but he certainly could have been clearer in his instructions. And finally, when you can't reward, you can always recognize people for their accomplishments. All the actors got for their bad performance were 3 words from the Duke: very notably discharged. And that little bit of praise made them feel appreciated and important. As William James once said, the greatest hunger in the human heart is the need for appreciation. So don't be stingy with your compliments. I'm Dave Romeo, and thank you for watching this episode of Romeo on Shakespeare. Please join me next time and see an English king whose bad judgment and disloyal advisors could cost him everything.